You worked with some amazing people, from design to product to growth, from startups to large enterprises. You probably got to see how they've turned their ideas into innovations, their improvements to best practices, and create a repeatable winning formula. Hi, I'm Pradeep, and welcome to the Three Keys podcast, where I talk with creators, builders, growers, people that keep reinventing themselves. This podcast focuses on the lessons they've learned along the way and boil them down to three keys they credit for their success. Forrest, thank you again for meeting with me. I First time I think we met was what feels like a decade ago, but just a couple of years ago. We met in person, picked up coffee from across the street, and walked over to our San Francisco office. And from then to now, I don't think I've seen your energy level or your enthusiasm change, even a fair bit. Um, you still have that vigor, I should say, and I love that, and that's why I love chatting with you.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about for a very long time, but especially since your most recent uh, startup, I want to say, I've come across a lot of entrepreneurship talks, founder talks especially, right? Where they talk about success, where they talk about how you go from 1 to 10 million, 10 to 100 million. But having walked the walk myself, there are a lot of taboo topics, right? Where you talk about your failures, where you talk about tripping over yourself. You talk about the struggles, mental struggles. Sometimes you fight with your own, and then you you're coming out from all of that, right? But you, it's this is not the first rodeo for you. You've done this many times, and you've seen everything. So if you don't mind, I'd like to focus on that today a little bit. But before
Yeah.
we get into that, want to tell me about yourself, your background, and then we can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the ultra fast version of me, background wise, is I was a cineast as a teen and preteen. I watched a ton of movies growing up, and I dreamed of being a storyteller and a filmmaker in particular. So when I went to college, I was very much involved in the Los Angeles film industry. Was working. It's very fortuitous. I was going to college at UCLA at a time that the very first digital production techniques were being introduced to the industry. So when I started college, everything was still being shot and edited on physical analog film. So it was like a very mechanical process. And by the time I got out of college and started working in the industry, everything was moving to computers. And in a period of 4 or 5 years, it went 100% to digital production, digital filmmaking, digital effects. So I was very lucky. I got my very first job out of college was at Lucasfilm, working with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. I actually
Nice.
met them both in my first 6 weeks of work, which was just amazing. And I got to work on Star Wars and Men in Black, and it's a really interesting films. Mission Impossible. This is in the mid '90s. But really, I found out pretty quickly after that that I was more interested in like business and software for storytelling than I was in actually being a storytelling artist myself. So I started the first of what became 4 or 5 companies that I've been a founder of, all of which have this kind of theme of being tools for storytelling. Now, some of those were literally visual effects tools, like the first company. And then one of the other companies was like a tool for marketing for hotels to like better find guests and do direct sales to people booking hotel rooms. But what they have in common is the hotelier was telling a story about their business, their hotel, what it was like
Hmm.
to stay at their hotel, where their hotel location was, why they had good amenities. Through software, through the web, and through mobile phone applications, they were telling that story. So I've kind of come to terms and rationalize that everything I've done in my career has in some ways been about tools for storytelling. That's how I describe my career.
Have you, in your journey, right? So you have that singular theme. At any point, did you go, I'm so glad I stuck to this because I'm seeing, the fruits of it, or, why the hell did I even start, go down this path? Like, have there been extremes?
Yeah, I mean, the most recent one, I think why you wanted to talk to me on this subject, the most recent extreme was I started a company called Pixvana that was very focused on virtual reality. And this was in 2016 through about 2019. And that was a product that when I left my previous startup, I was like, okay, what do I want to do right now? I would like to start another business. What technologies interest me? What business opportunities interest me? And I'm a tech geek, so I was really interested in VR technology, but I also thought it was going to be a really big business opportunity. I thought there was going to be
Mhm.
millions and millions of consumer headsets sold and adopted. And with that, the rising tide that would raise all these boats. And I thought it was a great time to start a VR business. And what I can tell you categorically, without doubt now, is it did not materialize into a big business. The numbers just don't bear out that people adopted and started using VR headsets. So any business in VR right now is a very small niche business, still waiting for its wave of opportunity, because you can only do so much when there's only so many consumers using the technology. So it was a really tough lesson in didn't matter how good our ideas were, how good we executed as a team, what an amazing product we built. In fact, I would say that what Pixvana built was by far my proudest achievement as a software product person in terms of innovation, features, capability. The team was amazing. It was by far the best execution, with undoubtedly the least impact on the market in the world, in the sense that there just wasn't a market for it. We were too early. We were probably maybe even a decade too early, for that particular product. And we didn't know that going in. And I can tell you that now today with confidence. Um, it was a dramatic experience for me because I'd never been through that previously. I had built new products, a lot of V1 products, where even like the worst of them would sell several thousand copies right away. Because when you're building a product, you know who it's for and what problem it solves, and you come out and you say, here's my product, here's what it does, it solves this problem. And there's some customers, you have a couple thousand or tens of thousands, or in some cases
There's
millions of
some
customers.
validation, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you get some validation. Yeah, that's true.
And with Pixvana, everyone that signed up for the trials, we had healthy signups. We had tens of thousands of signups, but we would deepen, we'd call them back or email them and say, tell us more about your project, about your scenarios, about your needs. And basically, as we were market qualifying, those leads, we found out that they were all people that someday intended to do VR, but didn't have a business application yet, because we were all waiting for the market to kind of exist. So it was a fascinating singular experience. It's the only time that's happened to me. Even my second worst product sold 10,000 copies immediately to somebody. There was always somebody that was waiting for the technology.
But let's say it's 5 years later, right? And the VR market that we thought could be is, and you wanted to do Pixvana again. What are the lessons that you learned back then that you would apply now, right? Let's say if you could synthesize it down to or distill it down to three things that you would ultimately make sure that you would or wouldn't do.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always like to say that, like, if you can't go back from an experience and say, here's things I learned that I would do differently, then you didn't learn anything. And if you didn't learn anything, then what the hell were you doing? Because like it is all about learning. Like early stage businesses is all about learning. So I actually learned a ton of things. Like if I could gift to the next entrepreneur my knowledge, I think my institutional knowledge from Pixvana could cut years out of the development life cycle for the next guy or gal to start a business in the space. If I had to distill it to three things, I think the first thing that we experienced, and all of our cohort 2016 era companies experienced, is when we started the company, like the VR headsets really weren't available yet. They were really alpha and beta prototypes. So I think we started, on the one hand, it was good to start to learn the technology and the different problems with building for that medium. But if I waited 24 months and waited for the Facebook Rift headset to ship, the Facebook Rift is really like the first. Wait a minute, I'm getting my terminology wrong. It's not even called the Rift, is it?
It's Oculus, yeah.
The Oculus, but the Rift was the very. This is what happens: is very quickly you unlearn everything you learned in the space. No, not the Rift. The Rift was the esoteric one with too many cables. The product that they shipped in 2018-19, which is a standalone headset with standalone controllers, without the cables, without the PC, $399. So it's the right price point, the right form factor, the right features. That product is really an indication of what the industry is going to look like. And going to that product and saying, okay, it's going to be a $400 consumer type price point, no cables, the motion tracking hands, good power management, good weight on the face. That form factor is the platform. Everything before that was kind of prototype stuff. So a lot of the developers, the ISVs at that time, had to work with prototype stuff, and there was a lot of tax, a lot of complexity. So while it was good because we got a head start, it was bad because we spent a lot of time working with stuff that wasn't the thing. It wasn't yet the form factor. It would be a little bit like to go back in time and before Windows became a dominant, platform, to have spent a bunch of time doing DOS development or doing, Commodore 64 development. And then someone that came along and just bet on Windows could trounce the people that had come before, because it turned out Windows was the platform. So I guess in summary, there's a platform bet. And in the VR space, I think knowing which platform you're betting on and really optimizing for that single platform as opposed for the entire category. So VR isn't a platform. Oculus is a platform. And I suspect Apple will ship something. So Apple, you might be able to build a really great VR AR business on the Apple hardware. Maybe you should just wait for Apple to announce. We still haven't seen what Apple's doing. Once they do, that might be a better business bet than what we were doing, which was we were buying the PlayStation, we were buying the Samsung Gear, we were buying the Vive and the Rift and all the headsets, Google Daydream, and trying to stitch together something across that. And that was a pretty big development, surface area to cover and cover well. So we learned a lot in the process, but it was pretty expensive and taxing. I think somebody could come in and just focus on one of those headsets and make a lot of progress and traction. That would be the first thing I would say. The second thing, in terms of VR, we started off focusing on publishing platforms for like media companies, and then we evolved into like consumer media authoring, and then we evolved into like enterprise training. So we were kind of moving around within the space. And obviously, in retrospect, we should have picked one and just stuck with it. And I think given ourselves, instead of like 12 months to like test, see that it didn't work, try something else, test, see it didn't work, test, see it didn't work. Well, on the one hand, that was really good. You want to test, fail quickly, and iterate. Yeah. On the other hand, for a completely new platform like VR, maybe just having a little bit more patience, moving a little bit more slowly, and investing over a period of 3 to 5 years, maybe that would bear fruits in a way that we didn't give ourselves a chance. Like, I think if we had actually stayed in VR and just been patient, I think some of the things that we had experimented with maybe next year would start to hit. So instead of it taking 2 years, it might have taken 6. We didn't give ourselves 6 years of runway. We spent our money more quickly. We went faster. We were trying to build a bigger, more disruptive company with a meaningful amount of venture capital, $20 million raised. And so by approaching the market with that kind of intensity and velocity, we actually went a little bit too fast, ironically, given that the market took longer to play out. Those are two big lessons from our experience on timing, both of which would be fixed if somebody were to start tomorrow to build Pixvana and just execute as well as we executed. Ironically, that probably would work out pretty well because the timing would be right. And you can't predict timing as an entrepreneur. It's, timing and luck are two things you can't control. So you can just, be smart, hardworking, build a great team, have good processes. Those are table stakes. You have to do those, but you don't get to control the timing or the luck. That's sometimes the market just tells you whether your timing was right or your luck was good. And all the VR companies, not just Pixvana, all the VR companies from 2016, 17, the timing was wrong and none of them got lucky. There's one or two exceptions. There's a couple of two-person game companies that had a hit game that, had a good outcome, but those weren't venture-backed businesses and they're not very big businesses. They're small 2 or 3 person developer shops. Those would be my 2 lessons from VR. I know you asked for 3. I'll stop there because that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So the platform piece, right? That is specific to the way you kicked it off. So would that stop you from ever looking at ideas where you have to depend on, somebody else's platform? Because when you start a company, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's a legacy SMB or a startup, tech startup, you are dealing with unknowns, it's the nature of the game. So by introducing this dependency on a platform, did you add another factor to that uncertainty that kind of, amplified the volatility of everything? Would that be different next time around?
Yeah, no, you're right. It did, absolutely. I think though, as I reflect on other things I've done, I think you always have to make a platform bet of sorts, whether that be an operating system, form factor, mobile versus cloud versus, desktop. You might be making a bet on a channel, like how you're going to sell the product through distribution, through value-added resellers, direct to consumer. through a marketplace like, app stores, or a reseller channel like for an existing platform like, WebEx or Salesforce. There's a lot of, those are all platform bets of sorts. There's the operating environment for the software, there's the sales environment, there's customer segments, there's markets like international, domestic, industries, business versus consumer, within business, educational, government. Like in some ways, those are all platform bets. So I think maybe from my many years of doing this and the knife wounds from the different failures, maybe you become aware in the moment of the bet you're making and the limitations and opportunities, because the trade-off is focus and the ability to go deeper against missed opportunity. Because maybe we should be selling to government, maybe we should be thinking about a reseller channel. So I think that's always a factor in business planning and business execution, and sequencing those. Basically wherever you start, over time you expand. So, I remember my very first company, we started Mac only in 1997 when the Mac was not thriving. This was before Mac OS 10, before Steve Jobs had come back. The company was kind of dying on the vine, but our target audience of visual effects professionals were mostly using Macs even then, more the creative community. So we did a Mac only version and then had to do a port to Windows NT, which was just shipping. And that was an expensive port and kind of took us a while, but once we had the cross-platform version, our business succeeded in ways that it couldn't as a Mac-only company. For Voodle, my current company, we launched iOS only and said, hey, let's launch on iOS and learn there and then go from there. And we found out very quickly that wasn't okay for our particular product, because our product is for teams to collaborate and communicate, and it needed an Android version because no team is only on iOS. Like there's always some guy or gal that's got an Android phone, or sometimes more people that have Android phones. So we had to quickly do Android, but the market told us that, and we only knew by doing it. So we did iOS only, got a first version out, tested it, and then we're told by every single user that they needed Android.
Oh, okay. And this time around, at least you have a platform that you could port to, right? So that became a lot easier. All right. So between Pixone and Moodle, I want to pause. You mentioned, all the knife wounds. So I'll go from professional to personal for a second, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Because I've had to rely on my own strength a lot. My family helped me to get over that journey. So for founders that are struggling right now, or facing failure, or have self-doubt, how do you say that you were able to overcome it? Maybe it doesn't apply to everybody, but at least how did you overcome it? And how do you have the strength and vigor to say, I'm going to try something new again?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this in the context of some other life challenges, not just work. So what I'm about to say is encompassing a lot of realizations I've come to kind of as someone approaching, just turned 50. So I have a lot of life experience now that I didn't have as a first-time CEO when I was 27, where I wouldn't have had these particular insights. But I think part of what a lot of entrepreneurs have as a quality, a lot of the other CEOs that I've talked to, at least 100 other early stage CEOs. I do a lot of networking, a lot of being mentored by others, and then passing that forward and mentoring other folks with early stage capitalization and forming a board and different things, hiring and firing that people have helped me with, and I pass that forward. And in that process, I've talked to at least 100, maybe 200 other CEOs, early stage companies. And I think what I see across all of us as a cohort is that not only are we good at dealing with setbacks, but we're also not good at appreciating the positive signals. So in other words, we have some kind of broken, trauma that allows us to be good at failures, in part because we don't really appreciate success. I think those go together. I think somebody that really in the moment is like, I'm succeeding, I'm great, I'm wonderful, look how brilliant I am, would really struggle to not succeed. As opposed to someone like me, like as an example, I don't take compliments well. When people say, Forrest, great job, I kind of tune that out. I almost don't hear it from some weird childhood trauma. That's another podcast. We can do a different interview on that. But it's like, yeah, I know, thank you. But really, let's talk about the problems. Like, let's get to the issues and work through the issues. Like, that's where my attention goes up when I'm hearing about failure, I'm hearing about risk, I'm hearing about problems. That's when I'm fully engaged. And when it's like, you're doing great, you're wonderful, you're the best, you guys are incredible, like I kind of turn off that noise. And I say that, I'm not saying like that's my superpower, isn't it wonderful? I'm saying I'm kind of broken in that regard. Like I've had to work later in life at like practicing when like a board director is like, great job, that was brilliant, you guys are wrong. I have to practice staying in the conversation at that moment. So it is something I'm working on. I'm trying to be better at hearing compliments in life in general, and particularly in the work environment. But to your question, I think that also is part of my particular strength as an entrepreneur, is dealing with setbacks and failure really well. You know, it's kind of like normalizing to a baseline and not being spun out by good things or bad things. So I don't get too stressed out when things aren't going well. When there's problems, I lean in and try to solve them. When things don't go as planned, I form a new plan and try a different approach. Like I'm resilient, I guess, in that way. So I think that's kind of a skill that a lot of entrepreneurs have, because fundamentally, as an entrepreneur, you're jumping off a cliff, falling to your death, and building an airplane to fly away, you know, without dying. And there's a real likelihood of falling to your death. It's not like, oh, yes, it's dangerous, but wink, wink, we'll be okay. No, like the vast majority of these things don't work. I mean, just talk to anyone that's opened a restaurant. You know, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, restaurants and all kinds of family businesses. My
Living
stepfather,
proof.
my stepfather, who I grew up around, you know, had 3 personal bankruptcies in his lifetime, and had a lot of success and a lot of failure. There were extremes. So I saw it growing up in the household. I saw him taking risks, and I think that's kind of how I'm, quote, broken, is I'm willing to take those risks when maybe a rational person would say, hey, you know, why not just go get the safe job and, you know, like not take any risks because it's dangerous. But I think the people that do, the entrepreneurs, generally are okay with failure and maybe just don't talk about it as much. Like you say, I think you're right. I certainly, in private, when I'm with entrepreneurs, we talk about failure. Nobody sits there and brags about their success. Everyone sits around and talks about challenges and problems and setbacks and anxieties and feelings of maybe not being worthy. Like everyone is very transparent in those private conversations. And yeah, you don't always see that, you know, dominating the YouTube channels and the podcast, people talking about their failures. That tends to get forgotten.
You mentioned 3 things, right? Dealing with setbacks, anxiety, and in a manner of speaking, objectifying your failures. Um, I had trouble dealing with the anxiety, right? By being able to objectify self, which is which itself is like, mind bending, right? How do you objectify yourself or your life? But doing that kind of helps you deal with the setbacks, but the anxiety that might stop you from doing that is something that that needs to be worked on. But you dealt with that at Pixvana, you moved on, and now you created Woodle. So how do you? I mean, you didn't really shut down Pixvana because your team is still with you, in a manner of speaking. It's a reincarnation. So how exactly did you pivot slash reincarnate, um, and you what of those lessons, because in Pixvana you had your platform that we were dealing with, right? The VR platform that had to go, consumerized, that had to be consumerized. Here you're dealing with a device that's ubiquitous. So the platform lesson that doesn't apply, but how did you reincarnate from Pixvana to Woodle, and some things that you could share?
Yeah, well, so with Pixvana, our last variation of what we were trying to do with we had this general platform for making and publishing immersive video. And we went from like media companies to like businesses to training. So we were thinking about training and immersive training, and we developed some amazing materials for active shooters, de-escalating angry customers, some really interesting content in partnership with some really interesting brands, big companies, Fortune 50 companies that were thinking of using VR extensively in immersive training. But we saw, even within that space, even though we were with the CEOs, with the senior staff, getting validation that they were intrigued and thinking of deploying, we could tell that it was going to take too long. It was going to be years, not months. And that was a problem for us, given our runway and how big of a business we were trying to build. So what happened in parallel is I started to notice that here we were fighting like crazy to kind of create this niche market around VR. And I just saw the explosion of cell phone video happening, and the selfie camera, and the ways in which people were connecting and conveying human empathy through photography and the selfie camera, back to my storytelling roots. And in particular, I went to a VR conference in Munich. And while in Munich, I saw some young women at a tour site taking selfie pictures. And I just started thinking also about AR on cell phones, about like, why are we fighting so hard for these couple million headsets when there's billions of cell phones being used every day for empathetic communication through selfie video? So the rethink of the business was, well, the mission is still there, but the mission of kind of connecting human beings and transforming the way they think and feel, which is what we were trying to do with VR. What if we did that with the selfie camera? What would the moral equivalent be? And the short version was like, well, what if we did TikTok for work instead of TikTok for home? What if we did something that allowed people that work together to express themselves through short video snippets, 60 seconds or less, mostly through the camera facing the selfie camera, but also maybe the camera facing the world where you're documenting the factory or logistics or something going on in a retail store, or the selfie camera, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm feeling, look what I'm doing. And basically created a place for people to bring those videos together to feel connected and aligned amongst colleagues. So it could be you and your immediate team at your job. It could be you with some vendors. It could be you with a V team of people that in industry you're connected with, but work, not home. And a billion people a month do this for, look who I'm with, look what I'm doing, look what I'm eating. They do it on Snap, they do it on Instagram. They're doing it. This is already a human behavior. It's just not a behavior for work themes. It's a behavior for social themes. So that's what we're trying to do. That was the pivot. And the team, we had to sell it to the team first and see who wanted to stick through. And we did lose a couple people that were like, no, I wanted to do VR. That's why I'm here. So I'm going to go leave and do VR somewhere else. So we lost a couple people that way. We did the pivot like 2 months before the pandemic hit. So then we had the pandemic and all the anxiety that produced as far as business uncertainty. We all, everyone globally lived through that. But in that time, we really came together as a team and said, look, let's go remote, because we weren't a remote team. Let's really build an amazing platform in Voodle to help remote teams feel connected and aligned using short video. So I think it really battle tested us to go through becoming remote, having been a physical office team in Seattle to now a remote team. I personally started living in an Airbnbs all over the world, not over the world, but over the United States. I've been in Hawaii and Palm Springs. So I'm really committed to remote work. We just hired a VP of product in Austin, Texas. We have a marketer in Florida. So we're now leading best practice remote first kind of team and learning from that. And we're off getting product market fit and, getting the first couple thousand users up and running and at scale. And it's been hard. We're working on that. There's about 15 companies trying to do something similar to what we're doing, which is great. It means that we're onto something. Like the idea is a good one. Yeah, the idea of short video work is a good idea. And I am confident that in 5 years, 10 years, there will be a ton of short video at work. And I hope it's Voodle and not I hope we don't come in last in the race, but it feels like a race and it's really exciting.
Well, that's great. And all the best to you. And you're right. I keep coming across, companies that are in this space, and I keep sending it to your team because I'm curious to understand, what's different this time around, right? What's different about this company compared to Voodle? Because I really love your product.
Yeah, I think we've got some really good, unique things that we built and that are in the works. However, it's going to come down to execution. I mean, it's a little bit like YouTube. There was 100 companies building YouTube, but YouTube dominated, got out in front and dominated. And I think, in retrospect, did YouTube have better features? Did they have any kind of unique scalable capabilities? And I think the answer is no. I think what YouTube came up with is pirating content from NBC and Viacom and not taking it down when they were told to. And that led to a viral cycle of adoption. I mean, it's a little cynical, but I think that's actually what happened. I think if you did a business case on why YouTube succeeded, it was piracy. And over time that worked itself out. They signed licensing agreements. Everyone's getting paid, but they broke some rules to get there. I'm not suggesting we'll do that. But I do think it's a race, and there's a lot of smart people on this, and we're going to have to be doing amazing, innovative work for many months, many years to come to be one of the leading players in the space.
Yeah, I think the lines between professional and personal are starting to blur, right? When your work collaboration app, whether it's Teams or Slack, it looks no different from your messaging app, right? You treat and you deal with it the same. So it's there. We are already getting there with asynchronous written messages. Now it's a question of getting there with asynchronous video messages.
Yeah,
We'll get
absolutely.
there soon. We'll get there soon. Well, Forrest, this has been great. Thank you again for your time. As always, I love chatting with you, man. And wishing you all the best. And I hope you and your team all the success.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. A pleasure.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.